Good evening. The opinions and statements voiced by our guests do not necessarily reflect the opinions of this network. Enjoy the shows.
You're listening to WBHM Digital Broadcasting, the best in paranormal talk only on Paranormal Experience Radio. Broadcasting live out of Birmingham, Alabama.
Hello, welcome to Paranormal Universe, where all paranormal perspectives apply. Join paranormal historian and ufologist Kevin Malik and psychic demonologist Jennifer Malik as they navigate us through the different categories of the unknown and the unexplained, including ghosts and haunted places, cryptids and monsters, aliens and UFOs, theology and mythology, metaphysics, forbidden archaeology, urban legends and folklore, conspiracies, crimes, and corruption, with top analysis from the experts of these disciplines. If it's amazing, unusual, or mysterious, if it's bizarre, creepy, and fantastic, if it's unbelievable, paranormal, or supernatural, it's here on Paraversal Universe. Here are your hosts, Kevin and Jennifer.
Hello, everyone. Whether it's morning, afternoon, or evening, wherever you are, welcome to Paraversal Universe, brought to you by the Northern Wisconsin Paranormal Society Limited at the Northwoods Paranormal Resource Center here in Rhinelander, Wisconsin. We're your hosts, Kevin and Jennifer Malik.
Hello, everyone.
Paraversal Universe is produced by Kat Hobson, voice of Fate Magazine Radio over at WBHM Digital Broadcasting out of Birmingham, Alabama. We're also heard on WCET 101.7 FM out of Columbia, South Carolina, High Point Radio 100.5 FM and 1620 AM out of New York and New Jersey, and the Rift Radio Network based out of Lakeside, Virginia. Welcome one and all, and hello to everybody in the chat room. We look forward to your questions and comments as always. The archive for the show will be available as well. Show archives from over the years can be found in various places on the web, including our Archives Like page on Facebook called Paraversal Universe Show Archives. Also check out our guest promo page, Paraversal Universe Radio, for what's coming up in the near future. And as always, we hope everyone is doing well. We have an awesome show coming up. We'll be talking about the Meadow Project with parapsychologist Trey Hudson. But first, as always, let's do our shout-outs. Shout-outs go to those people who shared our show banners on a regular basis or recently that we are aware of. We tried to get everybody. If we miss you, our apologies and thank you. So who do we have?
This week we have Walt Christos, Thoughts of Christos, Rody Speak, Dennis Koch, Jason Bland, Paranormal Soup, Robert Bull, Metaphysical Bounce, Howie O'Dell from the Orion Effect, Kat Hobson at WBHM, Lawrence DeMisa, Jean Broida, Lisa Reynaga, The Rift, Sudan, Lori Kreslaw, Dr. Chuck Kennedy, Project PSI Institute, Ty Ward, Fate Magazine Radio, Clairvoyance, Doc Brokus, Paranormal Daily News, DM Siegling, and Julie Wrench, Monster X.
Alrighty. Today's show is a special one. Why is that, you ask? Because this upcoming data has not been shared with the public before until now. We have had the opportunity to read the report concerning this case, as today's guest was kind enough to send us a copy before the broadcast. And let's just say, wow, there's much to share. We'll be discussing the Meadow Project, a case involving bizarre high strangeness with parapsychologist Trey Hudson. He's also a member with North Georgia Cryptid Research out of Georgia. There is so much to discuss. In this case, we're going to skip the bio because Trey can fill us in on that as we go along. Shall we bring him out?
Yes, let's bring him out.
Trey, are you with us?
Oh, yes, I'm here. I'm very, very glad to be here. And I say this with all humility. It is an honor and a privilege to be with you today.
Thank you for being here.
Likewise. Thank you so much. Welcome to Paraversal Universe.
Well, thank you.
Before we get into the Meadow Project, we always ask our first-time guests to tell us how they ended up in their respective fields. We haven't read your bio out loud, so we can start with the background for our audience, along with what prompted you to investigate bizarre phenomenon.
Oh, well, that's a long story and goes back many, many, many years. But I'm a child of the 70s and the 80s. And back in the 70s, there was a delightful television show called In Search Of. And some of your listeners might remember that. It was hosted by Leonard Nimoy.
Oh, yeah.
And I was just absolutely, intrigued and mesmerized by the stories that would, and cases that would come forth in that TV show. So, every week I was in front of the TV just absorbing this stuff like a mutated little sponge. And my father also was interested in such phenomena, and he would travel quite a bit and had listened to a radio show late one night while on the road, and the guest was the legendary Brad Steiger. And my father bought the book Gods of Aquarius, in which I promptly devoured just as fast as I could as a young child. And so I was always interested in that. If you remember back in the 70s and 80s, UFOs and a lot of this stuff was really, in the forefront of, our culture with shows like Project Blue Book and various science fiction shows and stuff like that. Well, one thing led to another, and I went off to university, and I was fortunate enough to study at the University of West Georgia, which at that time was West Georgia College. And I studied under, luminaries like Dr. Bill Roll, famous parapsychologist, Sand Stoos, Mike Aarons, Don Rice, and people like that. So my interest was really, really peaked, during that time. And, it's never really left me. I went on and had a career. My career, I went to the U.S. Army Intelligence School out of college and, did the military thing a while as an intelligence officer, was injured and left the Army and went on to do other things. Then I did a stint in Afghanistan. I worked with security of chemical weapons and various other sundry doodads, a little bit of this and a little bit of that. But became affiliated with the Oxford Paranormal Society back in the mid-2000s. And the founders of that decided to pursue other things in their life and appointed me as director. So I've taken the OPS, the Oxford Paranormal Society, off into the regular paranormal realm, but we've also branched off into extreme high strangeness with a division we have called the ASOG, which is the Anomalous Studies and Observation Group. And we have folks from special operations, intelligence, law enforcement, medical field, engineers, and all kinds of folks in that team. So, the interest and the quest, and the fire in my belly for this kind of stuff has never really left me.
That's awesome.
That is.
The report you sent was quite extensive and well done. Thank you for that.
Well, thank you.
We think the best thing would be to give you the floor, so to speak, and so you can walk us through this never before shared information about the Meadow Project and the high strangeness surrounding it, because it's a really fascinating case. Take the floor, and how did it start?
Okay. Well, it's a long story, so fasten your seatbelts, and I'm sure we will all get through this together.
Click.
But, you know, I was coming from a traditional, you know, paranormal perspective on this. You know, we investigate, you know, haunted houses and haunted buildings and businesses and stuff like that. And so kind of, you know, did the regular paranormal thing, you know, from that perspective. But one thing I always believe, and this is kind of echoes what your wonderful guest a few weeks ago, Danny Stewart, says, is follow the folklore. You know, the folklore will point you in the right direction. And I had come across a piece of folklore, which was also backed up by anecdotal statements by people in this particular area. And all I'm going to say is this area is somewhere in the southeast, and I'm not going to divulge the exact location because I want to try to keep it as pristine as possible. But the locals would talk about a haunted road, you know, that ghosts would come out at night and, you know, haunt this road, and you don't drive down it at night, which really piqued my interest, you know, not only from a paranormal perspective, but from a folkloric perspective. So I started doing some more research into this particular geographical region, and I found that there were MUFON reports of activity in this area, to include everything from mysterious glowing lights, you know, flying through the sky and inhabiting a certain crystalline UFOs chasing people down dark roads. And the more I just started peeling this onion back, the more I found, which was just really, really intriguing. Well, I have a very good friend of mine who is the founder and leader of the North Georgia Cryptid Research Group, and I contacted him about this area because this area also had a pretty robust history of cryptid, you know, Bigfoot type sightings. We also have something in Alabama called the Alabama White Thing, which is basically a light-colored cryptid Bigfoot type creature. So I decided that the Oxford Paranormal Society and the North Georgia Cryptid Research Group would get together and do a joint investigation in 2016. We camped in a pretty well-known area in this region while the leader of the NGCR stayed in camp. Myself and another investigator went and researched the haunted road. And we had a few anomalous things, like we heard a quail or bobwhite call in the middle of winter at a high elevation, which is, you know, totally, you know, unheard of for those birds. So, you know, we thought maybe it could be an anomaly, maybe it could be a cryptid. We didn't really know. And our trip down about 30 miles south of where the base camp was relatively uneventful. But things certainly changed when we got back to base camp. The Bob, who was the leader of NGCR, had told us about a remarkable situation that happened to him while we were gone. He was staying back at base camp to man the radios, and we were real big on always having radio communications with our teams when they're out in the field, and we were able to use a local repeater to communicate that long distance. But while he was back in base camp watching our gear and manning the radio, he had stepped back behind the tents to take care of some business. And it was a very cold, rainy, cloudy evening, and he looked up and he saw the moon. And Bob thought to himself, well, this is wonderful. The cloud bank is clearing. The moon has come out. It's going to be a crisp, cool, but otherwise dry evening. And then, much to his astonishment, the moon started moving to the left and drifted to the left. And he immediately realized, you know, full stop, put on the brakes, readjust. This is not the moon. This is something entirely different. So he watched this large luminous orb, and he said, you know, from his field of vision, it was about, you know, maybe 3 mils, you know, taking up the sky. It moved to the left. It stopped, and then a very small dark spot appeared in the middle of it. And the spot grew larger and larger and larger, almost like the iris of a camera opening up, until all you had was a ring of light, much like the ring of diamonds you see on a total solar eclipse. And then the anomaly completely winked out. At this time, his K2 meter also started going off. We are literally in the middle of nowhere. There's no background EMF. There's no high tension power line. There's nothing that would cause a K2 to go off. He A few minutes later, he looked up on a ridge above us and saw a cluster of what, had been called for, years and history and centuries, fairy lights or ghost lanterns or will-o'-the-wisp, those kind of things. So he saw a cluster of lights up on top of this ridge where nobody should be. And they didn't exactly move like people with, with flashlights or anything like that. So needless to say, this area now had our full attention. So that was in 2006 in January. So we got together and decided this is most certainly worth another look. So we got a little bit more robust team together in July of that year. And there was a meadow near where our base camp was on this initial trip that looked promising just because it was, it was a meadow and it was kind of, away from the campsite. It was quiet. And we just thought this would be a really, really cool part to investigate. And there's a pretty good trail that goes from this campsite to this meadow. Easy to walk. Bob, myself, and the other investigators have done it many, many, many times. And we figured this night what we would do is send Bob up ahead of us to hike into the meadow, and then we would follow two other members as drivers to drive maybe any cryptid or any anomalous items towards Bob, and he could possibly capture it on his flea or otherwise. So Bob was alone, and he came over the radio and said that he arrived at a well-known landmark, which was a tree across the trail. We all knew exactly where this was. And he said he didn't remember how he got there. So he had experienced missing time. Now, let me back up a little bit and tell you a little bit about Bob's background. He's retired law enforcement. He worked as a search and rescue professional and dog handler in California, has hundreds of hours of time, in the woods doing search and rescue. So he is a woodsman's woodsman, a true expert in this. And for Bob to say, I don't know how I got here was remarkable. It was just something that you didn't hear come from a man with this kind of background and experience. So we continued the investigation, and all of our teams arrived in the woods. And at one point, a secondary team was watching Bob through one of our FLIR units. Most of the folks in our team carry handheld forward-looking infrared scopes.
Nice.
And what we saw, or what this team saw, I was not on this particular team that saw that, I was with another group, is they saw in the FLIR Bob walking along, they were tracking him, in the FLIR, and then all of a sudden his image in the FLIR shrunk down to a single point of heat. That's what FLIRs, register as heat. And that point of heat moved 150 meters in 3 seconds, and then reappear as Bob in the FLIR. So it, was a man-shaped object, shrunk down to a point, moved 150 meters in 3 seconds, and then reappeared as a human. So obviously we were a little concerned about this. We just saw one of our
yeah, right.
It's like, I wonder, he might need some Excedrin or some Aleve after that. He might have a headache, so we better get over there and administer some help. So of course the team, we stopped all our investigations. We made it over to Bob, and we said, Bob, my God, are you okay? Are you feeling well? And he goes, yeah, I'm fine. Why? You just moved 150 meters in 3 seconds. From our FLIR, it looked like you were compressed down to a tiny point of energy. Are you sure you're okay? And he goes, I have no idea of what you're talking about. Now you have to remember the individual that saw this, one is a former Army Ranger and also has a degree in physics. And the second gentleman that witnessed this is a paramedic and a battalion chief at a fire department somewhere, in this area. So, these aren't your average witnesses. These are highly trained men that are used to, recording data, capturing it, for review and recovery later. And they were rattled to their very core about what they saw. We were expecting to find, Bob with some sort of major injury or, some sort of psychological trauma. But from his perspective, it was perfectly normal. As far as he knew, he just was dilly-dallying, meandering through the meadow. And, from his perspective, nothing at all was out of the unusual. So needless to say, we were all just absolutely baffled by this and decided to call it an evening, and go back to our
right. Amazing stuff.
So the next day, we were sitting around talking to this, and of course, Bob was like, I have no idea what you're talking about, and then we got into a big, metaphysical discussion. Did our time, shrink down? Did Bob shrink down? Was this an artifact of the perceiver or what we were perceiving? So you can go down a whole rabbit trail with that. But we thought we'd look at Bob's GPS. We also all carry global positioning systems so we can breadcrumb our trails and know exactly where we were when stuff happened. And the crazy thing about Bob's GPS track is it showed several short routes, listed on the GPS in areas that he hadn't visited. Like it showed him being on the other side, the opposite side of the.
Okay. All right. With that, it's time for our first commercial break. You are listening to Paraversal Universe. We'll be right back with our guest for the next segment.
You are listening to WBHM Digital Broadcasting, Birmingham, Alabama.
Oh, come on. I'm Southern, but... Nope. That'll do. Hello. I am Kat Hobson, host of Paranormal Experience here on WBHM Digital Broadcasting out of Birmingham, Alabama. I enjoy having guests from all areas of the paranormal, from ghosts to ufology to cryptids and beyond. You'll find some of the best researchers in their fields bringing you some great information. Join me on Wednesday nights from 8 to 10 p. Eastern here on WBHM Digital Broadcasting. Thank you for listening to WBHM Digital Broadcasting out of Birmingham, Alabama. The time is 23 minutes after the hour.
Welcome back from our first commercial break, everyone. This is Paraversal Universe, CET-FM, High Point Radio, and the Rift Radio Network. We're your hosts, Kevin and Jennifer Malik, and we'd like to take a minute to thank everybody who makes Paraversal Universe possible, including Graphic Art Director Lawrence D. Meza, music theme by Matt Stenz, announcer Frank Lee, producer and owner at WBHM Kat Hobson, Also to Howie Odell and Lisa Renaga and the Rift family, and to Michael Vera over at WCET-FM. Thank you all for carrying our content and working together on our behalf and the behalf of our audience everywhere. And of course, a huge thank you to God in heaven, whose strength beyond strength is stronger than all, for granting us this wonderful show and opportunity here to be with you all.
Amen.
Amen.
And appreciation to all the various platforms we are on, including iTunes, Spreaker, iHeartRadio, Twitch, YouTube, Daily Motion, TalkStream Live, TuneIn, Blog Talk, Podbean, Google Play, Mixcloud, and Paranormal Radio Livestream app, which is streamed and restreamed from various other outlets all over the world via the internet. This segment of Paraversal Universe is brought to you by the UFO Wisconsin Research Team, Wisconsin's alternative to MUFON, and also by the Paranormal Daily News. We now have a page on their website dedicated to Paraversal Universe, including the Paralogian Report, where our latest episodes are listed and linked. And this is Paraversal Universe, and we are speaking with parapsychologist Trey Hudson. Are you still with us, Trey?
Absolutely, sir. I'm still here.
We apologize to cut you off for commercial.
Will you please continue? You were started talking about your second time out.
Okay. I think we're where we were talking about reviewing Bob's GPS track. I think that's where we were. Is that correct?
Yes.
Yep.
Okay. Well, we the next day after this particular event with him turning into a small orb of energy or whatever it was and moving 150 meters in 3 seconds, we thought it would be wise to actually look on his GPS to see how the track of his travels matched up with what we experienced the previous night. And much to our shock, when we were reviewing that, we noticed that he was showing tracks of travel on the complete opposite side of a large creek that we knew that none of us had been over, on that side of the creek. So, we thought, well, this is certainly worth further exploration. And then we started noticing that there were several 6 to 8 kilometer straight long tracks listed in his GPS. And these were like straight lines. And the particular terrain in this area, you cannot travel in a straight line on foot. You just can't. So, I'm going to ask y'all for your answer. If you can't travel over terrain in a straight line via foot, in what way could you travel in a straight line from point A to point B?
It's a good question.
Yeah.
Perhaps in the air?
Perhaps.
Yeah.
Well,
so, all I know is the GPS showed that, an 8 to 6 or 6 to 8 kilometer track in a straight line over very, very rugged, difficult terrain. And then Bob, once again, claimed that he was never in those areas. Not only were they impossible to travel those kind of distances on foot, he said he was never in those areas. And so we had every intention of downloading this GPS data into a SIM card. And I try to keep all of this information locked up in a large safe to protect it. And before we could get back out of the woods, all the information had mysteriously vanished off of his GPS. Poof, gone.
Wow.
So, but the cool thing is we had numerous witnesses looking at his GPS, and we can all verify this and attest to that fact.
right.
It's also worth noting that night we experienced many odd floating lights, floating around. And we have an individual that at that time was manning our base camp. He's a qualified flight medic. So, this is a good, solid, down-to-earth, nuts and bolts kind of guy. And he came over the radio that evening and said, okay, I see you coming over the top of the ridge. I don't know why you're coming over the top of the ridge. That's a very difficult route, but I see your green headlamp. And we radioed back and said, we're still in the meadow. And nobody on our team has a green headlamp. So once again, there were those strange lights that we had seen there back in January of 16. So it gets even stranger. Later that night, Glenn, the flight medic, had gotten up to take care of some business in the middle of the night, about 0200, and he looked down the trail towards the meadow and saw a large white humanoid figure watching our campsite from behind a tree. Then he could see the head and one shoulder, almost as though it was peeking out from behind a tree. Well, this was quite unnerving, to say the least. So he went to get another team member, and she has a very high-end FLIR device to try to identify what this object was. And before she could get up and get her equipment out, the item or the object had disappeared. The humanoid had disappeared. It's worth noting that, as I mentioned earlier, Alabama and this area has a folklore of white humanoids.
Right.
So you go to Georgia, Tennessee, all throughout the Southeast. This is pretty well known, and even where I live now, it's known. So that was really odd. So we wrapped up that particular investigation and decided, well, this is certainly worth investigating. And if you think it couldn't get any weirder, wait until you hear what happened in February of 2017. It kicked up to Skinwalker Ranch kind of weirdness.
I was going to say, this has got a lot of, this is starting to sound, I'm seeing similarities already.
Yeah.
In the Skinwalker Ranch phenomena and what you're, relaying.
It's very, very similar. And that's one of the things that just really, took me by surprise. Now, this next, the February 2017 investigation, and that's some of the video footage that I sent you. So that's where that comes from.
Okay.
So this meadow is certainly worth investigating. It had our interest. Once again, going back to the folklore, there's a lot of folklore all over the world about haunted meadows, haunted glens. You've got the Devil's Playground in the Carolinas, and all of this folklore about haunted meadows. So we thought, well, we stumbled across something really super cool here, and we need to continue. So in February 2017, we sent a team, several teams back out, and we decided that we needed to up our game as far as protocols. It really rattled us that Bob had, moved 150 meters in 3 seconds, and he had no recollection of it, and was, moving around in the sky, and all of this kind of weird stuff. So we established a very strong set of protocols and established a division of ops called ASOG, the Anomalous Studies and Observation Group. And we took a very, almost a militaristic kind of view as far as the way we write our orders and we conduct ourselves, and we have a very strict chain of command, very strict radio communication, standard operating procedures, and things like that, because we thought that was probably the best, most logical, and the safest way to address this high strangeness we were encountering. So we established quick reaction teams that could pull another team out of danger if it happened, or if something happened. So that was kind of the mindset that we were going into on this investigation in 2017. So we were out there in 2017 in February, like I said, and one of the team members, which was Bob, noticed in his FLIR 3 upright humanoid figures. And of course, we did a team check, and none of the team members corresponded to the figures he was seeing. And while he was watching it, the 3 humanoid figures melded into one figure and then faded away. So it's like, cool, we have captured something truly amazing. Let's call it a night. But as they say in those obnoxious late night commercials, but wait, there's more.
I've heard that somewhere before in a different report. I'm jotting stuff down as you're going along. Keep going. I'm sorry.
Okay, that's fine. And we had one of the team members from a group up in North Carolina that your previous guest last week, Julie Wrench, is familiar with, observed in the FLIR what can be described as a large box. He said, I'm seeing this large box through my high-end FLIR. And he said it's 10 meters by 6 meters by 6 meters. And if you had a chance to look at the video I sent you, you can actually hear him talking about this box, manifesting while he's filming this. and the box, quickly dissipated. It almost faded into nothing. And we thought, well, we need to, certainly keep an eye on this. And we started to have another box appear, manifest itself. And we decided we need to establish a quick reaction force, establish an overwatch, and send a team towards that box to maybe get some sort of granularity on exactly what is happening. And we sent a team to the box, and in the 2 videos I sent you, there's a video of the team approaching the box from a standoff, from an overwatch. And then I have some video I sent you of actually filming the team from their point of view as they approach it.
Right.
As the team approached the box, as the overwatch team was watching them on FLIR, they disappeared. Now remember, this is in February in the southeastern United States. There are no leaves, on bushes or trees or anything like this. So they are actually watching this secondary team approach this area where this mysterious box is. And I'm not going to use the word portal, but, call it whatever you wish. Disappeared when they got to that area. Disappeared off this high-end FLIR equipment.
And we saw that.
You can see a rat in a tree at 200 meters with this equipment, but these guys disappeared. And you actually hear.
We're watching you sent us. We can literally see that.
Yeah.
Right, and you heard the operator say, "Did they just disappear?" Well, from the point of the view of the team, all they noticed was a temperature drop and a little bit of darkness. Like it was a little bit darker than the ambient light around it, but there was really nothing else, that mysterious. And when they started to come out of, this area where this box or portal was, where they had walked into it quite easily, now they said when they came back, they had to fight their way through briars and brambles that weren't there before. So it's almost like it was a different existence. They walked into it, no obstructions, and when they came out, as it dissipated, the ambient geography started becoming more prevalent with the briars and brambles, and they had to fight their way back out of it. And on the video, you watch them go into it, and then you watch them come back out of it. So, that is, from my perspective, that is ground-breaking, earth-shattering video capture of somebody approaching and coming out of what might be described as a portal.
And what makes that is the fact that it's in February and there's no foliage. Because
there is.
If it were summertime, because when you watch it through the FLIR, of course, it's all heat. It's
right.
It's not visual. It's heat. So, it's hard to tell. A certain definition. But to know that there's no foliage, there's nothing to walk into.
Right, and when they disappeared, they completely disappeared. It wasn't like you saw.
Yes, and they completely disappeared.
So, take that and do a comparison and contrast to what, Bob experienced, previously on, shrinking down to a ball of energy and moving 150 meters. So we thought, this is groundbreaking, what do we need to do? And the way our ASOG is set up is you have an operational commander and a tactical commander. Operational is in charge of the whole expedition. The tactical commander is in charge of just that particular operation that's taking place. So we got together and we did a quick huddle, and some of the team members wanted to stay out and do more investigations. We didn't know what the 3 entities we saw were. We didn't know if they were, what they were. We didn't know if they could be a danger to us or, could be an impedance. And, just so many things were flying through our heads. And I made the decision that we will stop for the evening. We will go back and do an after-action review. And try to capture all this data while it's still fresh in our mind. And that was the video after-action review that I sent you also. So we thought, okay, this has been a remarkable evening so far. Let's go back to campsite. Then I get a radio call from Glenn, the same Glenn from before, saying we have a visitor in camp. And this was 22:30 hours, 10:30 p.m. And she wanted to meet us. So this is very odd. Here we are in February in the middle of this, remote area somewhere in the southeast, and this person just drives up out of nowhere. So we go back to camp, and much to my surprise, I find a businesswoman waiting for us in the middle of the forest.
Weird.
It is weird.
And so, we're talking to this this businesswoman. This woman will not leave us alone. Every time we try to break off and do our after-action review, she was saying, you need to go down this remote road that's about 3 miles from here, and there's, amazing stuff at the end of it, and you need to leave right now. And it's like, no. I'm going to make the command decision. No, we're not. Because number one, I don't know who in the heck you are. And I don't know if you're setting us up, and you're just creepy as all get out. I'm sorry. This is bizarre. And so, you have a businesswoman wearing slacks and a blouse and a kind of a tweedy, business type jacket in the middle of the forest telling us this stuff. So it gets even stranger than that. I know you've read some various books, like Nick Redfern's books on the women in black and various stories of the men in black and things like that. Right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
What's one of the things that is mentioned in all these books, going all the way back to John Keel's books and before, is they miss social cues. It's almost like they don't understand our culture.
Right. Exactly.
Very much like this businesswoman in the middle of the forest in February walks 20 meters from the lantern we had there in our campground, squats down in front of all of us and urinates.
Wow.
We were absolutely flabbergasted. And, she just kept trying to ingrain herself into our operation, even to the point of talking to me directly and saying, oh, I happen to go to the same university as you. Oh, and I studied in the same psychology department as you. And she started naming off names of my professors and people I knew. I had no recollection of this woman.
Wow.
She did. Where did she come up with this data? And then statistically, what are the odds? The odds are mind-boggling that this would be. So, my contention or my belief is maybe this woman wasn't a woman. Maybe she was something entirely different. Maybe she was a paranormal entity trying to find out what had happened to us.
I'm sorry, it's time for our next commercial break. We will continue this conversation in a few minutes. This is Paraversal Universe. We will be right back with our guests for the next segment.
You are listening to WBHM Digital Broadcasting. The best in paranormal talk radio.
Thank you for listening to WBHM Digital Broadcasting out of Birmingham, Alabama. The time is 45 minutes after the hour.
Welcome back from our break. This is Paraversal Universe on WBHM Digital Broadcasting. Also heard on WCET-FM, High Point Radio, and the Rift Radio Network. We're your hosts, Kevin and Jennifer Malik. Before we get back to the show, we want to tell you all that we are also on MeWe and Twitter. Our like and group pages on Facebook are under various headings as well. Having said that, check out our Society's like page on Facebook, the Northern Wisconsin Paranormal Society Limited, as well as Jennifer's like page, Jennifer Malik, Psychic Demonologist. Leave a like if you like what you see. We always appreciate it. And this segment is brought to you by the book Trail of the Sasquatch, A Shaman's Journey, by cryptozoologist and Iroquois shaman Don Young, who's also a member of the NWPS. Check out his Facebook group pages, Kindred Forest and Indigenous Americas. Any comments for this week's show can be addressed in the chat room live. Let's get back to the show. This is Paraversal Universe, and we were speaking with parapsychologist Trey Hudson about the Meadow Project. Are you with us, Trey?
Yes, indeed. I'm still here.
Okay, so I guess just continue.
Well, we were talking about the mysterious and, dare I use the term, lady and woman in black,
right,
that appeared on the site, the mysterious, businesswoman in the middle of a remote forest, urinating in front of us, and acting completely strange. So, pretty much for that was the end of the evening's, adventure. We finally got her to go away, and we're able to sit down and do our video after action review. And it's worth noting, all of this stuff has such a high quality of experiencers. Like I said, everything from former special operations people, intelligence, people with background in Army intelligence, medics, nurses, electrical engineers, physicists, and the number of them. If you watch the after action review, there were like 12 people that all experienced this. So not only do the actual episodes and phenomenology is remarkable, but the quality and quantity of the experiencers is remarkable. So it was just a totally a really unique experience. But, so far what we've seen, at this particular meadow are strange orbs and lights, UFOs, mysterious visitors that seem out of place, lurking figures, watching our camp from, a vantage spot behind a tree, missing time, disorientation, a strange box or portal appearing in a mountain meadow, and, many, many other strange things. And it's also worth noting, and I forgot to put it in my report, which I apologize. I try to be a very, very meticulous report writer. But after our after-action review, as we were heading back to our various tents, one of the team members said he heard a strange, almost robotic or metallic voice coming from about 20 feet above his head, trying to speak to him. And he said he couldn't quite make out what it was saying, but, disembodied voices. So all of this stuff is happening in a very tight geographical location. So needless to say, my interest was piqued, by all of this. And so we decided to go back in 2018, last year in April. And we had a chance to review some of the items from our previous visit. And one of the photographs taken during the daytime briefing of the team for this visit, we got a chance to look at some photographs. And one of the photographs, and I sent you this also, there appears to be a possible Sasquatch watching us from the wood line. And the photograph, I'm, briefing some of my team members, and the point where the Sasquatch was watching us, or what we think was a Sasquatch was watching us, comes into play later on. So just kind of hold that for right now. We did go back to the area, look for whatever we thought it could be, if it was a stump or a tree limb or something like that, and could come up with no explanation. So like I said, this will come into play during a further visit. But in April, we got back to our campsite and established our base camp. And what we had decided this time is we would take a team of 6 and cross-country backpack into a remote location of a very, very similar meadow that, not so much maybe anomalous, but very, very similar geographically. And we thought this might be neat to kind of get away from our first meadow, move about 6 or 7 miles, and look at another meadow. So it was one of those things where we had to hike and hump all of our field investigation gear in with us. Not to mention our food and our hammocks and our FLIR units and night vision and all of this stuff. And we made a very arduous cross-country hike to this other location, which is maybe about half a air mile from the area that was reported by MUFON of having strange lights come out of this lake. So, it's not like we were completely out of the whole area of strangeness. We were still, kind of within the boundaries of that from a historical and folkloric perspective. Our hike was extremely strenuous and had to make several fords across hip-deep streams. And, we finally got back to this meadow, totally exhausted, but very happy that we had made the trek. We set up our camp at about 1900 or 7 p.m. and spent the evening talking and eating our suppers, and decided we would explore the area with night vision equipment and FLIR and audio recorders. And we didn't capture anything. We were very disappointed. We had hiked all this way and just didn't capture doodly. Caught some rabbits on FLIR, and myself and another team member saw a couple of things we thought might have been UFOs very far off in the sky, but nothing strange at all. When we got back to our camp, everybody was understandably tired after the sky watch and decided to go to bed at about 2200 hours, which is 10 p.m. At about 2 o'clock, one of our team members, Keith, and another team member named Terry noticed an odd light illuminating a dirt track where we had some of our tents set up. And it was more like a old dirt road or a fire break. And they described this light as being a very bright beam that shone down the road for 20 seconds, almost like a very bright flashlight or spotlight. But Keith, who's a very avid outdoorsman, he was adamant about the fact it was not a flashlight and was not a headlamp, and because he had noticed earlier in the evening what kind of light pattern that people's headlights and flashlights gave off. And he said this was not like that. And he said, as far as he was concerned, it was not a light used by anybody in our group. Now, we did have David said that he used his headlamp at about 1:30 that morning while adjusting his hammock, but he did not shine a light anywhere towards this dirt track or anybody else. And then David also said at 03:30, he heard a howl come from way off in the distance. And he's a very, very well-known Sasquatch researcher up in the So he thought it sounded like a Sasquatch type of howl. And at about 0400, about 30 minutes later, he woke up again and noticed an orange-red glow in a valley below us to the west. And he said it appeared to be the rising sun. Now, anybody who's spent any time anywhere knows that the sun does not rise in the west.
Right.
What was this strange glowing light coming from a valley to our west? We never found out. It dissipated several minutes later, and we were never able to ascertain what that was. But the valley where this light came from was also the same valley where they had the lake with the MUFON reports of strange lights and things like that. So all of this, ties in together very nicely. So about 0600, we got up and hiked back to our rendezvous point. We had an extraction team come and pick us up and take us back to the base camp. Before we left, Terry called us all over to his backpack, there in the middle of the dirt track where this strange light was. And I'm going to quote Terry in his report of what he observed. Quote, upon walking over to my backpack to start loading it with my gear, I noticed a stick approximately 5 foot in length and about 1 foot in diameter was resting diagonally between the open hip belt sections on my pack. The pack was still standing vertically on its end just where I had left it, but with the addition of the stick, which was on top of one side of the belt and under the other side. There was no stick present when I entered my tent the previous night, and I observed no sticks of this size anywhere in the area. Both ends of the stick appeared to have been snapped off and not cut. Upon inspection of the nearby area, I could find no sign of anywhere that it could have been snapped off from. I heard no noises of any kind during the night. I see no way the stick could have randomly fallen in this manner, since it did not appear to come from anywhere nearby. Furthermore, I see no way it could have fallen over on one side of the belt and not the other, end quote. And I sent you a photograph of that stick and the pack. Now, that was a photograph of the pack and the stick before it was disturbed. Okay. So somehow, something put a stick under one side of the hip belt and weaved it over the top side of the other side of the hip belt. It's just totally baffling. You know, we have no explanation for that.
That is unusual.
Oh, it was weird. So, you know, we've got the strange light in the west. We've got the beam coming down down the dirt track where we were camping, and now we had this mysterious stick, you know, appearing at Terry's pack. Well, like I said before, we hiked back to our extraction point and headed back to our base camp. We had a couple of folks that stayed back in base camp that did not go hiking with us, Daryl and Chris. And they decided to go back and look at the meadow while we were out hiking and returning, you know, having our recovery team go pick us up. They thought they would go and hike down to the meadow while they were waiting on us to get back. When they got there, they noticed a set of tire tracks. And I use the term tire tracks in quotes because that's what it looked like, two parallel squished down areas, linear in nature, about the width of an automobile, in the meadow, running east to west. At that time, this was a little bit warmer, so we had grass in the field that was about 2 feet, 24 inches high, and they noticed these two tracks about 36 inches apart, and the length of the track was about 100 meters. They started in the middle of the meadow and ended in the same way, almost like a vehicle was dropped into the meadow, drove for 100 meters, and then was lifted back out. They also noted that the saplings, molehills, and other things in the tracks were not crushed or damaged. The blades in the grass had been gently pressed with no picking. Dirt under the track was not disturbed and had no tire compression. Both Daryl and Chris have been trained in tracking. They're trained man trackers, so they know what a track looks like, and they know how to identify a tire track. And they said these were not traditional tire tracks because there were no tire impressions, no tread impressions. It's interesting to know that the track line ended in the west end of the meadow where the three figures were observed in the FLIR previously that melded into one. And it's the same side of the meadow where we photographed what we thought was a Sasquatch watching us from the edge of the woods. So all of this is like in the same geographical location. Well, at 1:30, Terry and David, Terry, who was with us hiking, David stayed back at camp, wanted to go back and hike to the meadow again and look at the tire tracks. They saw the same tire tracks, and they were also, just perplexed by the fact that the blades were gently pressed down and not broken, and molehills and saplings and stuff like that weren't squashed or disturbed in any way. They heard very, very faint noises in the distance, but were not able to make those out or identify what they were. So they decided to hike to the west end of the tracks and take some photographs using a full spectrum camera. In the viewfinder of the camera, both David and Terry, and I have affidavits of this, saw what appeared to be a box or cube once again in this same meadow. And this one was about 3 by 3 by 3 meters, which is 9 foot by 9 foot by 9 foot. In a direct line with the track about 150 meters distance, almost as though the tracks were pointing towards this box or portal. So obviously they were very excited and decided to approach it. And when they were about 100 meters from the object, it disappeared. And then when they retreated, the object reappeared.
Right. It's time for our commercial break. Why don't we pick up this discussion after our commercial break? You are listening to Paranormal Universe Radio
is a Fox News alert, a plunge on Wall Street. I'm Lisa Brady. The Dow down 618 points at the closing bell after the president's latest comments on the trade war with China. We'll have more on that in a moment, but first, Supreme Court Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg battles cancer again. A statement from the court says Ginsburg completed 3 weeks of radiation for a tumor on her pancreas.
A biopsy in July confirmed the tumor, which was treated definitively with no evidence of disease elsewhere in the body and no additional treatment needed. Ginsburg did cancel a summer visit to Santa Fe, but the court says she has otherwise maintained an active schedule. Ginsburg is 86 years old and has been treated for cancerous growths before.
Fox's Jared Halpern in Washington. The justice had surgery to treat lung cancer last December. Back to the sell-off on Wall Street now. It started after the president's reaction to China announcing more tariffs. Fox's John Decker is live at the White House.
In a series of tweets, President Trump fired off a new demand that U.S. companies seek alternatives for producing goods in China, and he signaled he may escalate the trade war with China after the country's latest round of tariffs. Although it's unclear what legal authority the president would have to force such corporate decisions, the president tweeting that he hereby ordered American companies to start looking for alternatives to making products in China. The tweets were in response to Beijing announcing that it will impose additional tariffs on $75 billion in American goods, including soybeans, autos, and oil. Lisa?
John, the Dow, the S&P, and the NASDAQ all down over 2%. The president also tweeting about the stocks dropping, suggesting apparently as a joke, maybe it's due to Democrat Seth Moulton dropping out of the presidential race. The Massachusetts congressman making that announcement official today. America's listening to Fox News.
The following message is brought to you by TD Ameritrade. So you've done a ton of research on a trade, but you can't decide if you want to go through with it. TD Ameritrade's trade desk might be the secret to figuring it all out. Just go to tdameritrade.com/trade desk to see how they can help gut check your trades. Member SIPC.
What might be the first vaping-related death in the U.S. is under investigation in Illinois.
The Illinois Department of Public Health said a person who had recently vaped was hospitalized with severe respiratory illness, and he ultimately died.
Fox's Mike Tobin in Chicago. This as federal health officials investigate more than 150 cases of respiratory illness in 16 states.
The CDC says most of these cases are going to be associated with THC. That is the active chemical in marijuana. The symptoms of these respiratory illnesses that people are coming down with include difficulty breathing, shortness of breath, and there's a host of digestive problems associated with it.
But Illinois health officials say they haven't found any single common link so far in the more than 20 patients in their state. Prosecutors in Paris are now also investigating child sex abuse claims against Jeffrey Epstein, including rape of minors. This following reports that a man from a modeling agency was accused in court documents of recruiting girls for Epstein, who killed himself in prison this month. The number of men suing Ohio State University over claims of sex abuse decades ago now tops 300.
Most of the over 300 men are plaintiffs. Others plan to sue Ohio State University, alleging school officials knew of concerns about Richard Strauss, but did little during his term to stop alleged sex abuse from the late 1970s to 1997. Ohio State has acknowledged its fundamental failure to prevent abuse by Strauss, apologized publicly, and says it's committed to the mediation process and potential several $100 million settlement, similar to female victims of now imprisoned Michigan State sports doctor Larry Nassar. Jeff Manasso, Fox News.
Recapping the sell-off on Wall Street, could have been even worse. The Dow was down more than 700 points. It closes down about 623. The S&P and the NASDAQ also down more than 2%. This is Fox News.
The following message is brought to you by TD Ameritrade. When it comes to investing, each of us does it our own unique way. Some of us want to go it alone. Others might prefer some guidance. Regardless of your style, TD Ameritrade is always creating new solutions to help you. From their award-winning technology to personalized guidance, they have everything you need to invest on your terms. Visit tdameritrade.com/YTDA to learn more and get started today. Member SIPC.
You're listening to WBHM Digital Broadcasting, the best in paranormal talk, only on Paranormal Experience Radio, broadcasting live out of Birmingham, Alabama.
listening to WBHM Digital Broadcasting, Birmingham, Alabama.
Welcome back to WBHM Digital Broadcasting out of Birmingham, Alabama. The time is 5 minutes after the hour.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Paraversal Universe, now in our second hour, produced by WBHM Digital Broadcasting out of Birmingham, Alabama. Also heard on the Rift Radio Network out of Virginia, WCET-FM out of South Carolina, and High Point Radio out of New Jersey. We're your hosts, Kevin and Jennifer Malley. Coming to you from Rylander, Wisconsin, here in the USA at the Northwoods Paranormal Resource Center. You can always enjoy excellent fringe talk radio for awesome and informative radio shows about the paranormal, supernatural, esoteric, and Fortean topics on this network and affiliate platform websites. Not only our show, but many other good shows about different facets of the unknown and unexplained. Much to listen to and much to enjoy. Stream live on TuneIn, iTunes, and the Paranormal Livestream app, available from Android app in the iTunes Store. This segment is brought to you by the Supernatural Magazine, where our articles can be read, along with articles from other paralogians. And back to Paraversal Universe. We are speaking with parapsychologist Trey Hudson. Trey, are you with us?
Indeed, I am.
Okay, so I know that we have a couple comments came in.
Okay.
And I'm pulling them up right now as quick as I can. And they were in regards to what you were discussing. Let's see if I can, I think it's on this one right here. Okay, yes, Kristen Paston, listening now. I can state that these events did happen and are true. I was present for a large portion of these events, and I'm still perplexed myself as to what we all experienced and continue to experience. Awesome job, Trey Hudson.
Yeah, she was one of the experiencers that was with us for many, many of these events. And, I'm not going to disclose her last name, but Kristen is a certified emergency room nurse and is currently going to medical school. So that's her background. So this is, a very down-to-earth, well-grounded, reliable experiencer. So I'm just glad that Kristen popped into not that I need validation on this, but it's always nice to hear from somebody else saying, this stuff really happened. And it was just so bizarre that, we're still trying to process it, even to this day.
Jim Halbert also says, great job, Trey.
Very, very glad to hear it. Hopefully I do justice to not only the events and our experiences, but to the people that I was blessed to have with me when these events were happening. I believe we were discussing before the break, David and Terry trying to photograph the mysterious portals or boxes at the end of the track line.
Yes.
And so what would happen is when they would move towards it, it would dissipate. They were looking at this through a full spectrum camera, looking at it through the viewfinder. And then when they would back up, it would reappear. And so they thought, and this is going to disappoint a lot of people, as it horribly disappointed Terry and David and disappointed myself, they thought we were going to photograph this and get video. And as soon as they started to, they realized they had forgot to put the SIM card in the camera.
Oh.
So every time I talk to David, if I'm up in the Uaris, visiting with him, he's like, I still can't get over it, but I forgot to put, the doggone SIM card in that camera. So, but the cool thing is it was a cube, in the same area, like the ones we experienced, several years before. And it was also the same location where we had the three luminescent humanoids meld into one. And it was the same location that we had the humanoid watching us from the woods, which looked like a Bigfoot, when we examined the photographs of it from that previous visit. What I also forgot to mention, and I did mention it in the notes I sent to you in the video, while we had the team moving into the portal and then moving back out, Kristen, the individual who just commented, she noticed another mysterious, anomalous figure that appeared to be watching us. And I don't know if you saw it in the video, but it was almost like a vertical, anomalous figure.
We did notice that, actually.
Yeah, we did right away.
Off in the distance, and even to the point where she goes, "Who or what is that?" So right. where that comes in is after we got back from backpacking to this remote location, we still had another evening of investigation. So not wanting to squander another opportunity, we sent teams back out into the meadow that evening, and it was pretty uneventful, except Bob, the search and rescue expert, the mysterious energy transforming man, noticed and captured on his ear a large figure standing in the wood line, standing, hulking, and watching us with no neck and massive shoulders. Now compare that once again to the photograph of the Sasquatch, and then compare that to the anomalous figure that was watching us when we were approaching the Cuba portal. So just all of this stuff is tied in together. Stuff that's happened has been reported and recorded and signed affidavits. We have video interviews with most of the people, and everything that I'm saying is absolutely verifiable and has been captured in one way or the other. We have done subsequent trips back to the meadow. We have not experienced the same volume or light anomalous happenings. We don't know why. It's almost like the meadow went cold. So for about the past year, we have pretty much stayed away from it and have not investigated it. But we have plans to go forward in the future. And something that we're looking at doing, which is maybe kind of risky, I don't know if y'all are familiar with the Estes protocol for ghost boxes and ITC.
Explain.
That's where you take a standard, ghost box, with the frequency hopping ghost box, and you have an experiencer use sound headphones that block out any exterior noise. They put on a blindfold and then completely isolated from the environment around them. And all they're doing
is... We do know.
Yes, we've heard of it, yes.
In fact, that's a piece on it, actually.
Yeah, so what we're going to do is go out and take the Estes protocol and take it out into the middle of the meadow.
Oh, interesting.
Nice. Yeah, that'll definitely be interesting.
So we hope to do that sometime this fall, as soon as I can get a team together and whittle away some time in my schedule and try to make that happen. But, we're constantly trying to come up with new ways of looking at this phenomenon. We're trying to take our philosophies to take the best practices out of ufology, cryptid research, ghost research, and take the best practices out of all of these and use them. Maybe cross into areas that maybe these techniques haven't been used in before, and see what we can shake loose. Because I think we're dealing with a paradimensional events. John Q called them ultra-dimensionals or ultra-terrestrials. And so I think looking at it from a holistic, multifaceted perspective, that may be where we get some of these remarkable results. So if y'all are interested, I will keep you updated on what we do next. And perhaps I'll have an amazing, recordable, and mind-blowing experience in the future, as if all of this wasn't mind-blowing enough.
Right. I would continue.
That would be great.
Yeah. I mean,
that would be great.
And you don't always get activity every time, So, and certain times seem more prone to it than others, I think. But yeah, when you step back from these different discipline sciences of the unknown and unexplained, you realize that the stuff is connected in different ways. And we do the same thing with the NWPS. With paracryptozoology, we go out and we do these paracryptozoological expeditions where we're trying not just techniques from cryptozoology, but we also bring in techniques from ufology, from parapsychology, from metaphysics, bring in psychics. Another thing we've been trying is the SLS camera, the skeleton software. Anything we can think of that is not anything that's not opening malicious doorways or disrespectful.
Right, exactly.
And we have a place, what we call high strange, just up here too in northern Wisconsin. And you know what these there's actually a couple of places up here. One is the Paulding lights in
Paulding.
The interesting thing is that like the actual light that they call the Paulding light is traffic, but I don't know if it's because of the parasociology with all the people congregating there to look at the light because they don't know what it is, or just because the town closed off that road years ago. Not really sure why, but there is so much paranormal activity surrounding that whole area, you know? So it's, even though people come to see that one little light, there's other stuff going on all around it that is paranormal, whereas the light the light isn't. And then you got like Brown Mountain lights and all that strangeness. Hoya-Baku Forest is another one.
The Morpha lights, others.
Yep. Yeah, so there's and the olive orbs, the olive high strangeness, they have a lot of stuff going on. You know, it's not just one thing. Another thing I jotted quick is when you talked about the white figures.
Right.
And so one possibility would be that it is some kind of, I guess, like energy being or something.
Something.
But that's if it's creating its own light. If it's just white, could it be an older Sasquatch? I mean, humans gray. Would not Sasquatch as well?
You know, it could be. You know, we just don't know. We don't know if if what we saw was similar to the energy beings, that we saw that three of them melded into one, or if this was, a Sasquatch. Because if you go back and you look at, and I mentioned the book Gods of Aquarius by, the dear, Brad Steiger.
Right.
His idea, and this was really kind of cool, and this book was written back in the 70s, is whatever these phenomena are, and if somebody tells you they know what it is, they're either a fool or a liar, because nobody knows. We're grasping at straws here.
Right.
But we can make guesses, and hopefully educated and not, not silly guesses, but, a guess based on facts as we know it. But he said that perhaps these entities or these creatures or whatever actually are reflective thought forms, that these entities appear to us and we see them as we want to see them. So
thought form. Topa.
Yeah.
Right. So, if a cryptid researcher sees it, they're going to see it as a Sasquatch, or if a paranormal researcher sees it, they go, well, that's a ghost. When in fact, maybe they're looking at the exact same thing, but just through a different perspective.
Right.
Right. Well, it's like, look what happened with Slender Man. It was it was fictional until he was created by means of a topa.
Yeah,
exactly.
In Milwaukee, or in the Milwaukee area, that where the two girls tried to kill the other girl, so they could live with Slender Man in his
mansion in the
woods. Right.
Right.
And so whether it's and with that, I figure you have one of two things going on. You either have like a topa, a thought form, or you have a negative entity coming in saying, oh, so you want a Slender Man? I'll be your Slender Man.
Right, the masquerade.
Masquerade.
Right. And then compare that to the trickster spirits, that
Exactly.
So it's, once you start peeling back the layers of this onion, it just gets stranger and stranger as you work your way down to the core. As if you'll ever reach the core, but as you're on that journey, it just gets stranger and odder and weirder and more inexplicable.
Okay, everybody, and with that, it is time for our next commercial break. You are listening to Paraversal Universe. We'll be right back with our guest for the next segment.
You are listening to WBHM Digital Broadcasting, Birmingham, Alabama.
Thank you for listening to WBHM Digital Broadcasting out of Birmingham, Alabama. The time is 23 minutes after the hour.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back from our commercial break. This is Paraversal Universe, produced by WBHM Digital Broadcasting, also heard on WCET-FM and the Rift Radio Network. We're your hosts, Kevin and Jennifer Malik. Before we get back to the show, let's take a quick moment during this hour to specifically mention the radio call dials for the AM/FM terrestrial radio stations who carry Paraversal Universe, including WCET on 101.7 FM out of Columbia, South Carolina, and High Point Radio, which can be found on 100.5 FM and 1620 AM out of New Jersey, which broadcasts in New York, New Jersey, and Pennsylvania. Hello to all of you who are tuning over the airwaves. Thank you so much. And hello to everybody on the internet as well. And to those who will be listening to the archives. We appreciate all of you. This segment is brought to you by the Parasociology like page on Facebook. Parasociology is the study of how paranormal manifestations and experiences can affect a family, group, or collective. Parasociology also examines how spirituality is practiced in different cultures. So go check that out and leave a like for future content. And back to the show. This is Paraversal Universe, and we are speaking with parapsychologist Trey Hudson. Are you with us, Trey?
Yes, sir, I am.
Alrighty. So, Another thing I jotted down, which I was curious about, is I know with some forest phenomenon, you'll have fairy phenomena.
Right.
Smaller orbs, pins of light, points of light, those kinds of things. You had mentioned different kinds of orb phenomenon. The one you mentioned, however, struck me more as a UFO report, in the fact that you described it as being large like a sun, which I think is interesting.
Well,
can you elaborate on some of the orb phenomena?
Yes, sir. Absolutely. During the beginning of my story, if you will, I talked about Bob seeing a large circular. And I'm just going to call it an orb because it was round. Was it a UFO? Was it an orb? Was it an opening in space and time? I don't know. It was just a large grayish white circular image in the sky, and it presented itself, high, above the horizon, or where the horizon would be if it was daytime. And he perceived it as being the moon. That's how it appeared to him. And then I'd mentioned, before that it had moved to the left, stopped, and then slowly started winking out of existence. Now, the other kind of lights or orbs that we have experienced were more of what folklore calls will-o'-the-wisps, or ghost lights.
Right.
A faint light, floating through the forest, or something that looks like a distant flashlight or headlamp, off in the distance.
Right.
What's interesting, though, is, like I said earlier, and any folklorist will tell you, is follow the folklore. And what we need to keep in mind is, our predecessors, be they Native American, Celtic, Scandinavian, Slavic, or whatever, they're looking through their experience to their own unique set of optics. And you mentioned, paranormal sociology. So they're looking at these phenomena with their shared experiences, their personal experiences, and their cultural experiences.
Right.
So if we fast forward, to the 20th century, back in the olden days in the 20th century, and we look at Whitley Strieber's experiences, and he wrote the wonderful book Communion.
Right.
And he's describing grays. Well, if we back up across the pond several hundred years into Celtic folklore, what they're looking at isn't a gray, but it's the wee people. Take our experience with the white figure that was watching us from the edge of our campsite, just almost out of visual assessment, and you move that over into the Balkans, and maybe they would look at that as a werewolf. So, this phenomenon is older probably than man itself. And if you start looking at it through various optics, we're seeing the same phenomenology all over the world, all the way back as far as we can in history, and quite frankly, back into prehistory. And so if we just look at it from that perspective, maybe we can get a little bit of granularity on what exactly is going on. And more importantly, maybe we can start shedding some of our preconceived notions. And the evil that, plagues any paranormal researcher is labels. I can't stand labels. Don't tell me it was a ghost. Just tell me what the experience was. Because as soon as you label it through, a neuro-linguistic process, you start creating a reality that might not have any relation to what you actually experienced.
Neuro-linguistic conditioning is a very interesting topic. We have a book in our library on it.
Oh, very good.
Yeah. So you had mentioned doing, I suppose, a semi-controlled session out there. I mean, as controlled as one can get in an outside environment. You are in the middle of the forest, away from society and whatnot.
Right.
Have you guys done any EVP sessions?
Yes. Haven't really had a lot of luck with it. We have done some EVP. We've also done some ghost box, and we hope to use the Estes protocol. But I also have a ghost box I built with a noise gate and a reverb and a battery powered amplifier.
Very cool.
And and what I did is when I built it, I made it completely field deployable. It completely runs off of batteries. It's in a Pelican box, so I can literally clip it to the outside of my pack and ruck it into wherever we need to go. So we have done that. Those haven't been terribly conclusive. I don't know why. Sir?
I'm sorry. Yeah, I was going to say, no, just for us out in the woods, they haven't been very conclusive either. I was just noting similarities. Go ahead.
Right, and for the life of me, we just had a standard investigation of a resident, a quote unquote ghost investigation several weeks ago, and had remarkable, results with our ghost box. Just some really phenomenal stuff. But I go out into these remote areas and not so much. I do not know why that is. I'm going to have to think about it and ponder on it a little bit. You would think that, if we're dealing with paradimensional entities, it wouldn't, our version of three-dimensional time and space is irrelevant to them.
Right.
So it wouldn't matter if we were on the top of Mount Everest or in, the basement of Waverly Hills, that the same entity would be able to communicate with us because our geographical, distances and all that is immaterial to them. So I don't know. And I think it's interesting, and thank you for sharing that with me, that you've had likewise a lack of, experiences coming through a ghost box, in remote locations.
Right. Yeah. That's, not to say that once in a while, we had one incident where we went out on a Bigfoot report in the middle of nowhere, and we had never met the guy before. And after we did the walk of where he had his things, I asked Jennifer if she had picked up or sensed anything, any forest spirits or anything. And she says, one forest spirit, she says, but there's also an old man that's been watching us. And she points, and the guy's face goes, he's like, I don't know who you guys are. Never, met you before, talked to you before, never told anyone. He says, there's a grave marker just past where you're pointing out there. And we're in the middle of nowhere, as middle of nowhere as you can get in Wisconsin. So yeah, I mean, you can run into entities in the middle of nowhere. It is
right,
but it's not common.
Mm-mm.
And let's see, how about any dogmen? Do you guys have dogmen reports?
Actually, Bob has. He's a representative for Georgia in the North American Dogman Project, and that's he's really the one to talk about that. But no, you have reports of snouted Bigfoot or dogmen, things like that in this area. We have the Southern United States has a very rich paranormal history and a very rich paranormal culture. You go back and read about the Haints, back in the olden days. There's a lot of Celtic sociological influences from Scotland and Ireland, that came over as the South was primarily populated with people of Scots and Irish, backgrounds. And then you have when the slaves were brought over from Africa, a lot of that culture and their understandings of the paranormal world has also woven its way into our culture down here in the South. So it's very, very rich. And actually paranormal happenings, paranormal experiences aren't poo-pooed as much as they might be in other parts of the country because of our culture and our history in this part of the world. you start getting off into the more rural areas, like where I live, and that's very common, for people to approach you and say, well, I had, this happen, or I had that happen, or, my aunt was a sensitive and she, would talk to, our deceased loved ones and things like that. So, it's just really a neat experience. And if, a person takes a little bit of time to, maybe open their eyes, close their mouth, and open their ears, they would be amazed at exactly what has been going on around them, for all the years past.
Right. Any mounds in there in the vicinity, burial mounds?
There are burial mounds, in not only where I live, but also in the area where, where this location is. It is an area that has a very sad history, when many Native Americans were forced off their lands and forced into the inhospitable environment out west, to an environment that they were ill-equipped to thrive in. So you have that, that residual negativity in this area. You also had a lot of skirmishes, intertribal skirmishes. You had skirmishes between various states' militias, back in the early 1800s, and the various tribes. So there's a lot of warfare and strife in this area. Also, a lot of mounds and Native American villages and population centers are undiscovered. And I mentioned that I have a degree in psychology, but I also have a minor in anthropology with a focus on archaeology.
Right.
So when you start, peeling that back and looking, you find just a very, very rich Native American history, just right under the surface. As we go, bebopping about our lives, there's this whole history, allegorically under our feet, and unfortunately sometimes literally under our feet, which includes, grave sites and burial mounds and things like that. And the slow desecration of these type of sites by progress, isn't anything new. You read about, old Anglo cemeteries, in various parts of the country being bulldozed over, or the graves, quote unquote, being relocated. In Savannah, Georgia, there's literally 2 graves in the runway of their regional airport. And there are 2 headstones that are laid horizontal and planes land on top of them. So, we've been desecrating the resting place of our ancestors, forever. So it's entirely reasonable that, the resting places of Native Americans have likewise been desecrated and forgotten. And that might be a contributing factor to some of the things that we're experiencing.
Another thing that that comes to my mind is ley lines.
Say again?
Ley lines.
Oh, ley lines, absolutely. And if you go and look in, sacred spots, be they, Native American, Anglo, whatever, there's ley lines, and and I'm trying to remember, it's been a while since I researched this, but there's a very interesting correlation. I think it's on the 32nd or 33rd parallel, where you have a horizontal parallel of strangeness, all just right across the United States. This area is not too far from that parallel. So, is it related? I don't see why it couldn't be. I've always wanted to explore ley lines a little bit more, not only from the traditional understanding of ley lines, but we are trying to come up with a way to measure microgravities. Can we measure microgravities in a field setting? And as of today, we haven't come up with a way to develop a field deployable piece of equipment with the necessary sensitivity to detect microgravities.
Wouldn't that be amazing? Yeah, awesome.
Oh, yeah, but it's also interesting to note something else we're looking at is time dilations. And we're trying to come up with a way to set up a control and an experimental, highly accurate field deployable timepieces that we can take a timepiece out in the field to the meadow with a team, have a baseline set, have another timepiece stay back at base camp quite a ways away from it, and then when the team comes back, compare the timepieces and see if there was any spatial or temporal violation.
That's an excellent idea.
So we're always constantly trying to come up with ways. What is this phenomenology? Is there a way that maybe we can empirically capture some of the data? Maybe the data will lead us to a greater understanding. My gut feeling is it'll just create more questions, but that's entirely cool too.
The geography, such as like limestone or bedrock or whatever, and water source. Go ahead.
Right. This has a lot of water, a lot of waterways, a lot of limestone, some quartz. So, that there's a lot of people believe, and there's some data that points towards anomalies, convalescing in areas where you have these geological attributes. So, this is just kind of one of those super duper, paranormal sweet spots that, we just quite frankly happen to stumble across. And the cool thing is, for most of the team members, and I have team members from all over the Southeast, it's within a reasonable, 5 or 6, 7 hour driving range for most of us, that we can explore this area from time to time. So I just feel very, very lucky and very blessed that this opportunity presented itself, and even more so that I got to share it with your listeners.
And we really appreciate that. And with that, why don't we take our last commercial break? You are listening to Paraversal Universe. We will be right back with our guest for the final segment.
You are listening to WBHM Digital Broadcasting, the best in paranormal talk only on Paranormal Experience Radio. Broadcasting live out of Birmingham, Alabama.
Thank you for listening to WBHM Digital Broadcasting out of Birmingham, Alabama. The time is 45 minutes after the hour.
Alrighty, we're back, everyone. This is Paraversal Universe, produced by WBHM Digital Broadcasting. Also heard on WCET-FM, High Point Radio, and the Rift Radio Network. We're your hosts, Kevin and Jennifer Malik, and we're glad you are with us as always. There are some Facebook group pages we would like for you to check out. The Ultimate Conspiracies group page is one, which focuses on conspiracies, crimes, and corruption. And also check out Lake Monstrosities, dedicated to aquatic mysteries and wonders of all kinds. Feel free to join them both. We would love to see you there. Each network mentioned tonight has a group and like page on Facebook as well. Also can be found on other social media sites, so go check that out for upcoming content. This segment is brought to you by the 5-star Reader Choice Award-winning epic fantasy trilogy Helm by Robert L. Malik. And back to the show. This is Paraversal Universe, and we're speaking with parapsychologist Trey Hudson. Are you with us, Trey?
Indeed, I am.
Alrighty. So for our last segment, let's see. First, well, actually, I'm looking at the list, the report list of anomalous happenings, and strange orbs and lights we discussed, mysterious visitors that seem out of place, lurking figures observing the camp, and missing time we've discussed. The UFOs you touched on. Did you get to all the UFO stuff?
Yes, the UFO stuff primarily was Bob seeing his mysterious moon-like UFO traversing the sky. And then the second UFO is when I mentioned that we had a team hike 7 miles up to a similar meadow. Myself and Keith did a sky watch, and we observed, and we have reports on this, a series of satellites traversing the sky. You know, as you'll lay there and watch, you know, a satellite move across the sky, and you can say, okay, that's probably the International Space Station, and that's, you know, whatever. And is we saw two things we thought were anomalous at this secondary field. One was a UFO, and let me go back to my notes here, is we saw about 12 or 15 objects that looked like satellites moving across the sky, and most were moving in a north to south or east to west, you know, direction like most satellites do. And we observed many aircraft, you know, at a very high altitude, and those were obvious that they were aircraft. Two things did stand out that particular evening. One light, it looked almost like a satellite, but it moved in a zigzag pattern. You know, zigzag. And to my knowledge, we don't have satellites that move in a zigzag pattern. So that was kind of odd. And then we saw two lights moving as they traversed that maintained a constant spacing. They were right behind one another. And, you know, if you used your fingers as a reference for mils, they were about 2 mils apart as they traversed the night sky. So, you know, were those UFOs, you know, in the purest sense of it? We didn't know what they were, so they were unidentified. But were they anything extraterrestrial, extra dimensional? You know, who knows? But as far as, you know, what people would call UFOs, those were about the only things that we experienced were those two incidents.
Yeah. Has any of this come home with you?
No. And actually, people ask me that a lot of times. I have never had anything come home with me. The closest thing I ever had come close to that is when I started experimenting with ITC, instrumental transcommunication. And like a lot of folks, I went and bought a Radio Shack radio and did the Shack hack. Right. You know, and you know, which I still have that radio. You know, that little ghost box. And
cool.
A great little piece of equipment. And right after I started, you know, learning how to use that and, you know, do analysis on what was coming out of them, I was home asleep, and the phone rang. This was about 0200 hours, about 2 o'clock in the morning. And I picked up the phone, and a mechanical synthetic voice, almost like it was coming through a synthetic voice box, said the phrase, "Gates of Hell."
Ooh.
In the and dead.
Interesting.
And that is the closest I've ever had anything follow me home. No more instances like that before or since.
Well, that's good.
Yeah.
That's good.
Yeah, it was a little unnerving. I sat there, I'm like, what do I need to wake my wife up or just not say anything about this? How about I just not say anything? But no, I've got a, without going too far into it, I've got a pretty strong religious belief system, and I believe that will, insulate myself and protect myself from some of it following me home. So no, I've never had much of a problem with that.
Yeah, I was just going to ask about protection. So, most people that do this kind of work,
you need protection.
Yeah, are cognizant of that. So
right, because you don't know what you're going to encounter when you do this kind of work.
Right, exactly. I've only ever had one instance, several years ago that I thought was demonic, and it was kind of an. I know we're getting off on a different subject here. This is more standard paranormal, but it gone into a residence. The residents were describing all this stuff that happened. We did some ITC sessions, remarkable results, remarkable EVPs. One of our team members was scratched. And what was interesting is when we were doing the initial client interview and, we're going through the home and discussing it, I had asked them, I said, have you done anything that might have precipitated this? And they said, well, no, nothing we can think of. I said, are you involved in the occult in any way? Sometimes you can open up a doorway or a pathway or create a certain, you set yourself off as a beacon to some of these forces that you want to be contacted or interact with. And they said, no, nothing like that. And, and I looked as I'm glancing around and I saw that on their dresser was a pendant of an inverted pentagram, not a point up pentagram like Wiccan, but the inverted pentagram.
Right.
And I'm like, that's very odd. And when I looked away and looked back, I saw one of the homeowners quickly grab that and put it in their pocket to hide it.
Ooh.
Wow.
While we were doing our investigation, we had our little command center set up in a outbuilding. Had a neighbor come by and said, yeah, they play with Ouija boards and they do occult stuff all the time. So when we started reviewing our evidence, we had a very gruff voice say, get the F out and just all this stuff. And I told the client, I said, you've opened up a doorway yourself. I am not equipped, nor am I going to bring my team into this environment. I think it's dangerous. And you need to contact a local clergy member to help you get rid of this because, you've done some things in your life that have invited these entities, into your existence, and you're going to need some help to get them to go home. So only one instance of that. So, and that was a little unnerving. But
actually, Jennifer had a similar experience where homeowners had invited her in to do a medium walk, and they turned out to be Satanists who they wanted to see if anyone could pick up on the stuff they had summoned and
yeah, they would purposely bait people to come in.
But
really,
yeah.
But we're just about at the end of the show here. So, are there any links that you would like to share for the teams you are on?
Probably the coolest thing that's the most active is if you'll go on Facebook and go look up Oxford Paranormal Society. And that's Oxford, Alabama, not Oxford, England. Some people get confused. I get requests from England to come investigate all the time. And just request to join that group, and I'll approve the membership. And, I'd take some delightful cartoons from your Paratoons and stick them on there and discuss all kinds of
Thank you very much.
So, yeah, that would be probably the best place.
Okay, awesome. And what about the cryptid group?
Now that is, like I said, that's not my group. That's run by Mr. Bob Wilson. But you can also find that group under the North Georgia Cryptid Research.
Okay. We'd like to thank you so much for taking the time out and to share this this amazing, information with us.
Yeah, we greatly appreciate it.
Yes, and it's an honor to be the first ones to share it with everyone. We're really honored that you contacted us out of the different shows that you could have contacted. So
right.
Really, and we appreciate that. And yeah, very much like Skinwalker Ranch.
Yeah.
You could, and I'm sure a lot of these state parks have little areas too that are very similar that may cause some of these disappearances and whatnot. Who knows?
Indeed. And thank you for having me. It's been more of a pleasure than you can realize.
You're most welcome. So we'd like to thank parapsychologist Trey Hudson for being such an awesome guest. This was such a good interview.
Likewise, it was wonderful.
Next week, in fact, from next week on, every other week, we will be doing the Paralogian Report.
Yay!
However, in 2 weeks, we will be off because our producer is going to the UFO Congress. Yay! So that's awesome. But we will see you here next week with the Paralogian Report. Feel free to support any of the networks mentioned here tonight, as well as the Northern Wisconsin Paranormal Society Limited, 501c3 nonprofit organization, by donating. It's folks like you who ensure that these excellent organizations will be here tomorrow. To the believer, the evidence is overwhelming.
And to the skeptic, there will never be enough.
Thank you. Good night. God bless you. Have a wonderful weekend, and we'll see you here next time.
Good night, everyone.
You are listening to WBHM Digital Broadcasting. The best in paranormal talk radio.